It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum. And I'm all out of gum.
Hi there, Mr. John here, and this time we're gonna do something different today. Rather than reviewing a game, I've decided to tell you an awesome story. A story about how I became a PC gamer, how I switched from console, or more specifically, console and handhelds to PC. So without any further ado, let's begin with my story of my life, shall we? So my gaming adventures began when I turned my purple Game Boy Color for the first time. The handheld had Super Mario Land in it, and boy, it was an experience I'll never forget. Granted, the game was 10 years old, and it was dated at the time when I got the Game Boy Color, since Super Mario Bros. DX was released in that time. But still, it was a great start for my gaming adventure. But however, it wasn't just Super Mario Land. I also had Pokemon Silver, which is one of my favorite Pokemon games by the way. And it was an awesome experience catching Pokemons, battling them, you name it. Hell, whenever I went out, I always brought my Game Boy Color along with Pokemon Silver, and it was a great time waster. However, the Game Boy Color wasn't the only console I had. I also had a PS1, and I spent my entire childhood playing on my PS1 after school, weekends, etc. I had a lot of great games like Tekken 2, Spyro 1, FIFA 2000, Hercules, Gex 3, and Toka, and I even had demo discs as well, which they are pretty interesting. But on my 7th birthday, I got a Game Boy Advance with Super Mario Advance 2, which was actually a port of Super Mario World, which was an outstanding game. Then I began buying a lot of Game Boy Advance games like Super Mario Advance 4, Pokemon Sapphire, Emerald, and Leaf Green, as well as the Game Boy version of Need for Speed Underground 2, which for what it was a decent port for a handheld game. Then, later on, I got my PlayStation 2 in the US, which when I was a kid, I always went to America for summer vacation, and I had tons of PS2 games there. Since there were stores like EB Games or GameStop, these games usually cost like between $3 to $5 back like 2005, where these stores were still relevant. I had games like Burnout 1, Gran Turismo 3, Dragon Ball Z Budokai, Monsters Inc., and Test Drive. Every time we went to summer vacation in America, I always spent my vacation playing these games, especially Gran Turismo 3. However, there was a problem. The PS2 as well as the PS1 were region locked. I couldn't bring my US PS2 games to Portugal, which was pretty sad. That being said, in Portugal, I bought a PS2 and I only had 2 games when I bought it. Gran Turismo 4 and Need for Speed Underground. The reason I only bought 2 games was because in Portugal, the prices of PS2 games were still in the mid-30s or 50 euros, meaning it was much harder to buy cheap PS2 games unlike in the US. Nowadays in Portugal, you have stores like Sex, which sell PS2 games at like 3 to 10 euros, which was pretty good, and I was able to make decent collection of PAL PS2 games in Europe, but nevertheless, I still had a good time playing these games. Then, much later, I got a Nintendo DS Lite with a bunch of great games like Super Mario Bros. New, Mario Kart DS, Pokemon Diamond, and as a matter of fact, during my teenage years, I've spent my entire high school life playing my Nintendo DS, playing a lot of Pokemon Platinum, Mario Kart DS, and Pokemon Black. It wasn't just the DS though, but also the PS3. Boy, that console was expensive back when it was first released, and when I brought my PS3, it came with 2 games. Uncharted and Ratchet & Clank Tools of Destruction. The former I didn't play that much, although it was a great game, whereas the latter I spent a lot of time playing it. It was fascinating playing these games, but one thing that PS3 shine is that unlike the PS1 and PS2 were region locked, PS3 was region free, meaning I could buy games from the US and play them on my European PS3, and that was a good thing since I could get more PS3 games, adding more to my collection. But unfortunately, in 2014, my PS3 died. That was because it got the yellow light of death, which was pretty common for fat PS3 models, and I was like, what the fuck just happened? It was sad because I had my PS3 for 7 years, and in 2014, the PS4 was going to be released, and I was going to buy it, but then I realized that the PS4 will not have retro compatibility, meaning I couldn't play PS1, PS2, and PS3 games, and I was like, fuck that shit, I'm sticking with my modded PSP and my Nintendo DS. Sony can eat a penis! I also had an HP laptop and I only ran League of Legends, and I've played LoL a lot and it was fun, but the issue was that my HP laptop was a weak piece of shit. Anything other than LoL ran like shit. So I was pretty limited when it comes to PC gaming, and therefore I was sticking with consoles. But then in 2016, I took a technical computer classes in Portugal and I wanted to learn how to build a PC. So during that time, I did a lot of extensive research to see what parts were useful and what parts they weren't. And after that, I built my own PC, and my PC had an i5 4690K, 8GB of RAM, a 1TB of hard disk drive, and a GTX 750 Ti, which by 2016 standards, it was an okay GPU card, but it was fine for most games that I had on Steam, and the first game I tried with my new PC was Doom 2016, and it was a force to be reckoned with. It was a sight to be behold. Playing at decent frame rates and that dreadful 30 FPS on consoles like the PS3, playing with keyboard and mouse was a sight to behold. It was not just that, my PC could handle emulation, which is my favorite thing when it comes to PC. I cannot overstate how much I love emulation. I've installed RetroArch on my PC and started to emulate the SNES, Mega Drive, PS1, N64, Dreamcast, and the GBA. And the experience was honestly much superior than using the original consoles. For instance, I can use shaders so that makes games look like it was played on a CRT, not to mention that you have the ability of overclocking the CPU, making games run much smoother than ever before, and also enhancements such as 60 FPS codes and widescreen patches and so on. Not only that, my PC could emulate PS2 games, something that I was dreaming every time. Playing these PS2 games on a PC with HD graphics was a blessing, considering that the PS2 is pretty difficult to emulate, but somehow my PC with the i5 4690K ran all of my PS2 games like a charm, and I was extremely happy with the results. However, that wasn't the end for me. In 2018, after graduating from the technical computer course in Portugal, I've decided to upgrade my GPU, since I knew that my GTX 750 Ti wouldn't handle future games from 2018 and onwards. So my next purchase was getting a GTX 1060, and it caught my eye. Since its VRAM size was 3 times bigger, it was also faster and it only cost 250 euros. So I decided to buy it, and holy moly, it was a huge improvement, most notably in games like Doom, where when I got my 750 Ti, I had like between 40 to 70 frames per second, but when I got my GTX 1060, I had between 100 to 130 FPS, and that was a huge deal, since those are big numbers. Forza Horizon 3 also benefited from the GTX 1060. Prior to the GTX 1060, I had like 30 FPS. But when I got the GTX 1060, I got like between 70 to 100 frames per second. However, the PC port of Horizon 3 was dog shit. While I got performance gains, I still had crashes with the game, but still, at least I had some improvements. I was happy with the GPU card, and still to this day I use it. It's a fine card, and while there is the RTX cards, I still find the 1060 being pretty decent even to this day. Around in 2020, when I got new games from my Steam library, games like Forza Horizon 4 and Doom Eternal, I realized that these games had some issues, even though they ran over 60 FPS. They had issues like stuttering, but then I realized that the issue was both the CPU and the amount of RAM that my system had, not the games themselves. Having 8 gigs of RAM was not good enough, given that 16 gigs of RAM was the standard. Not to mention that my i5 4690K was struggling with recent games since it had only 4 cores and nothing else, meaning I had to make an upgrade sooner or later, and I did it. I decided to upgrade from Intel to AMD, meaning replacing my motherboard, CPU, and RAM sticks. Not only that, but my PC also got an SSD specifically for Windows 10. One of my complaints about the Windows 10 is that when it's installed in a hard disk drive, it gets really slow. However, when it's installed on an SSD, it's fast as fuck. Anyways, I upgraded my CPU to a Ryzen 5 3600 with the Hyper Evo cooler for overclocking purposes, as well as 2 sticks of 8 gigs of RAM with 3200 MHz of memory speed, which was a huge improvement, and I tested my games, it was an improvement. There was no stutters, it was silly smooth, and I was pleased with the results. But wait, there's more. Later on I got a 144Hz monitor, replacing my old Asus 60Hz monitor, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't that smooth. However, the 144Hz monitor that I got was smooth as fuck. Not only that, it also had G-Sync, which meant my games would run much smoother than ever before. Especially with emulators, since when you have G-Sync enabled, you can play games at the correct refresh rate. This is pretty important since you can play PAL games with no issues when using G-Sync, and it's good. At the end of the day, I do believe that PC is way superior than consoles as a whole. PC offers better frame rates, mods, emulation, better resolution, etc. Something that consoles never do. Speaking of consoles, the only console that I have right now is the Switch. It's a pretty decent console. I like the portability of it, and the games are pretty decent. However, some Switch ports are a hit or miss. Either they run decent or run like dog shit. For instance, Duke Nukem 3D on the Switch runs fine on the Switch, whereas the Switch port of Motor Racer 4 is completely horrendous due to poor frame rate, bad resolution, and poor draw distance. Granted, the game itself isn't bad per se, but these issues were more than enough to consider it a bad port. Now, of course, we must know that the Switch has its own limits, so it's a case of 50-50. Either it's the dev fault or it's the Switch fault for not having enough power. So that's why I prefer PC over consoles, since PC doesn't have these issues to my knowledge. So that's my story about how I became a PC gamer. So if you enjoyed my story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you guys next time.